So as we're going through the 9th chapter, we're looking at a series of relationships which make a woman either forbidden or permitted either to her husband or to her possible Yavam or to her brother-in-law in the event that her husband dies. We went through all of the classic Doraita, all the classic forbidden relationships mentioned in the Torah in the last couple of Mishnayot. And the Mishnah is now going to embark on what it calls secondary relationships, shniot, secondary relationships. And these are relationships which are forbidden, but they're forbidden by the rabbis rather than written out explicitly or learned explicitly from the Torah. And I just want to remind us about a little definition of these, which we learned in the Talmud in Yevamot when we looked at the 7th chapter of the Mishnah. And the Talmud taught, Tanu Rabbanan, our teachers taught, Mahem Shniot. What are the secondary relationships? And the Talmud there gives a whole list of these. And you'll recognize these as kind of sort of obviously forbidden relationships, but they are not mentioned in the list of forbidden relationships in the Torah, but nevertheless, the rabbis forbade them. Em Imo, his mother's mother, that's his grandmother, Em Aviv, his other grandmother, Eshet Avi Aviv, and his grandfather's wife, Eshet Avi Imo, and his grandfather's wife on the other side, Eshet Achi Av Mina Em, and the wife of his father's half-brother, Eshet Achi Ha'em Mina Av, and the wife of his basically the wife, his mother's paternal half-brother, and his son's daughter-in-law and his daughter's daughter-in-law. So all of these are essentially forbidden by the rabbis. And also the daughter of his stepson. He can't marry the daughter of his stepson. So these are the secondary prohibitions. And the Mishnah in the 9th chapter is now going to pick up and say, Shniot midivrei sofrim, the second degree prohibitions from midivrei sofrim, from the words of the scribes. And what are we going to do with these? Well, let's carry on in the Mishnah. Shniya laval velo shniya yavam. If it's second degree to the husband but not to the yavam, asur labal umuteret la yavam. If the prohibition is second degree to the husband but not to the yavam, she's forbidden to the husband and permitted to the yavam, just as we learned in the previous Mishnah. Shniya la yavam velo shniya la baal asur la yavam umuteret la baal. If it's a second degree prohibition to the yavam but not to the husband, she's forbidden to the yavam but permitted to the husband. Shniya lazeh velazeh. If she's a secondary prohibition to both of them, asura lazeh velazeh. She's forbidden to both. So secondary, we just can't do it. Ein la lo chtuba, and this is where it gets interesting. Ein la lo chtuba velo perot velo mezonot velo velayot vehavaled kasher kofim otzo lehotzi. So if she is married to someone for whom she's forbidden to marry via one of these secondary prohibitions. So in other words, it's forbidden. It's not forbidden by the Torah. If it were forbidden by the Torah, the marriage would essentially have no effect. She's married someone who the sages forbid her to marry. And it's very interesting. We're going to find out as we look at this Mishnah that she is actually punished for this. There's some kind of double standard because she seems to be punished for this, but he does not seem to be, at least in the words of the Mishnah. So, the Mishnah explains, Ein la ketubah. She doesn't have a ketubah. She's going to be divorced. She is going to be divorced. We're going to learn kofinot ol hotzi. Her husband is going to be compelled to divorce her, but she doesn't have the right to the ketubah. Ein la ketubah. Velo perot. She doesn't have the right to any fruits of her property that the husband has used during the time they were married. Velo mzonot. She doesn't have any right to essentially to be maintained in terms of her daily, her daily needs for upkeep, for food. Velo v'layot. And no depreciation on her. She doesn't have any right to depreciation on her property. And then the Mishnah concludes, Kofin oto lehotzi, and her husband is compelled to divorce her. So she gets quite a raw deal out of this. And it is in contrast, by the way, to prohibitions which are biblically mandated. So the Mishnah goes on to say, Almanah lekohen gadol. If it's a widow married to a high priest, grusha v'chalutza lekohen ediot, or a divorcee or a chalutza married to an ordinary priest, these are all forbidden relationships, and we've seen these lists before. Mamzeret u'netina Yisrael, a mamzeret or a netina married to someone of Israel, but Yisrael a mamzer natin, or a daughter of an Israelite who's married to a natin or a mamzer. In all of these cases, yesh lahen ketubah. In all of these cases, they have a ketubah. So these kind of relationships, they're forbidden, and yet if there is a marriage, she has ketubah, she has rights on divorce. And the Gemara explains this to say that these forbidden relationships are forbidden by the Torah, and there's no need for the rabbis to reinforce their forbiddenness. But in terms of the shniot, the secondary prohibitions, these are ordained by the rabbis, and the rabbis need to be very anxious that the community will not listen to them. And so they build in these additional stringencies, or you might say these additional punishments for any woman who would be prepared to get married on those terms. More stringent than for a prohibition which is spelt out in the Torah. Now, the Mishnah is then going to go on to talk about the extent to which the daughter of a Kohen who marries an Israelite, or for that matter, the daughter of an Israelite who marries a Kohen, can eat truma. And again, this chapter maybe seems to be a mirror image of the 7th chapter, because we need to go back to a Mishnah in the 7th chapter, which we've looked at already, but just to remind ourselves. The fetus, the yavam, the betrothal, the deaf mute, and a boy who's 9 years and 1 day old, disqualify but don't bestow the right to eat. Poslen velo ma'achelen. In other words, as far as truma is concerned, if there's a fetus or a yavam or a betrothal, then someone who's involved can lose the right to eat truma, but cannot gain the right to eat truma. It's almost like it's in a gray zone. And the Mishnah is going to spell this out in detail. Bat Yisrael Mo'oresed la Kohen, the daughter of an Israelite who was betrothed to a Kohen. So she hasn't married the Kohen yet. She's betrothed to him. Now, as soon as she gets married to him, she can eat truma. The wife of a Kohen can eat truma. But the Mishnah is telling us that until she's married to him, she cannot. In other words, merely through kiddushin, merely through betrothal, she doesn't acquire the right to eat truma. Similarly, mu'beret mikohen, she's pregnant from a kohen. Shomeret yavam la kohen, she's a shomeret yavam to a kohen. In other words, her husband has died. Her husband's brother is a kohen. So she's a shomeret yavam. She's waiting for yibum from her brother-in-law, and he's a kohen. And similarly, the chen bat kohen li Yisrael, it works the other way too. The daughter of a kohen who had any of these relationships with an Israelite, lo tuchal bi truma. So generally the daughter of a kohen can eat truma. She's in her father's house. But as soon as she embarks on one of these relationships, she can't eat truma anymore, because we remember we said the Mishnah we remember the Mishnah in the 7th chapter, poslen velo ma'achelen. These relationships can stop someone eating truma, but they can't allow someone to eat truma. They only have a negative effect. So a woman in this situation can't start eating truma, but if she can already eat truma, if she's a daughter of a kohen, she has to stop at this point. Now, and the same thing, by the way, applies with a Levi. But Yisrael moreset la Levi. Well, now we're going to get a carbon copy of the first half of the Mishnah in the second half. But Yisrael moreset la Levi, the daughter of an Israelite betrothed to a Levi. Muberet mi Levi. Maybe she's pregnant from a Levi. Shomeret Yavam la Levi. She's Shomeret Yavam to a Levi. And similarly, in the other way around, v'chein but Levi Yisrael. And similarly, the daughter of a Levi who has any of these relationships with a Yisrael, with an ordinary Israelite, lo tuchal b'maser. She can't eat mas. She can't eat maser. Only Levi'im can eat maser. What if she's a daughter of a Levi engaged to Kohen? But Levi mu'oreset la Kohen, mu'uberet mi Kohen, shomeret yavam la Kohen, b'chein bat Kohen la Levi. So the daughter of a Levi is betrothed to a priest, or pregnant from a priest, or she was shomeret yavam from a priest to a priest. And similarly, the daughter of a priest with a Levi, if it goes the other way around. Lo yochlu, they can't eat. Lo v'truma velo v'maaser. She can't eat truma. She can't eat maaser. She can't eat maaser because she's no longer entitled to eating truma. She's no longer entitled. They no longer eat that. If she's a bat Levi, she can't eat maaser in her father's house. If she's a bat kohen, she can't eat truma in her father's house. But as far as the man that she's got a relationship with, that relationship isn't really consummated yet. And so she can't eat truma or maaser in his house.